It was like coming home. Simply startling. I didn't know what to expect. So I've always been a big fan of Wilson Audio ever since, I want to say, about 88 or so, 1988, when I bought my first pair of Wilson Watt puppies. Well, actually, they were the original Watts. And then eventually I bought the puppy. At the time, what I loved about Wilson was the incredible clarity, speed, transparency, detail, sound staging, this lack of coloration that I'd never heard before. Now, keep in mind, I was very young at the time, probably about 19 or so, and every speaker that I had heard, other than the Martin Logan CLS, had a significant coloration. They might have been very nice, but they had significant coloration. At the time, the dream speaker that I'd been reading about, that I always thought that I would buy, was the Infinity IRS Beta. Some of you who are old enough may remember the Absolute Sound. A lot of the senior editors either wanted a pair, loved a pair, or had a pair. And so that was the speaker that I dreamt about owning one day. Unfortunately, at the time, Toronto didn't have any dealers who had a pair for display, so I couldn't hear them. Then I heard the Martin Logan CLS, and I fell in love with the incredible clarity and detail and transparency. When I heard the Wilson Watt, I had the same kind of clarity and detail and speed, but from a relatively small box that was really, really dense and very heavy. And the image was much sharper. So I loved the pair, and I bought a pair. Over the years, I've owned every Watt puppy / Sasha / Sasha DAWs. I've owned virtually every Wilson speakers, with the exception of the Wham, and I know the speakers very, very well. Part of what I enjoyed about the early Wilsons was that David Wilson, in many ways, is a unique individual in our industry. His background in science made him conscious of procedures to make sure that his designs continue to improve and get better. He set in processes that allowed him to ensure that the experiments that he was conducting would push the product forward. The other thing that I enjoyed and respected about him was that he had a reference. His references were his recordings. And again, many of you will know that David Wilson, in the early days, Wilson Audio produced recordings that I believe you can still buy today. And because he was intimately involved in the recording process, he knew what the sound of the recording should be like. As a matter of fact, the original Watts were designed for him to use as recording monitors, so he could hear the playback of the microphones. If there is a legitimate criticism about the early Wilsons, is that they could be too ruthless. And I think part of that is because David Wilson's recordings were of such a high quality that when you played them back through the Wilson speakers, they sounded absolutely magnificent. They sounded lifelike, they sounded real, they sounded as if you were there at the venue. But when you played normal recordings, you would hear how bad some of the recordings are. And of course, being as transparent as they are, you had to make sure that your supporting equipment was just as good. And if you didn't make sure that that was the case, it could certainly be subpar. And therein lies the challenge. When the speaker is so good, it reveals good and bad. There's just no two ways about it. I want to say about 15 years ago or so, Wilson transitioned from what was then a modified focal tweeter, the inverted titanium dome tweeter, or concave tweeter, to the now soft dome silk tweeters. And while they still maintain this beautiful airiness and transparency, the potential harshness has gone. And I think a large part of it also is due to the fact that as we evolve as human beings and we mature as listeners, we also change in terms of our philosophy of design. At least that's my postulation. I think that that's what happened. I believe also that as Daryl Wilson got more and more involved in the design process, he brought into the design his own expectations of what the sound should be like. And in many respects, I think that Daryl's designs are more in keeping with what people want out of their music systems, hence the incredible success that Wilson has experienced, certainly since Daryl's designs have come to the forefront. All of that is a preamble to say when I listened to the new Alexia V, which you can see the unboxing or uncrating in the link below, I didn't know what to expect. So on the one hand, I knew chances are I would like it very, very much because I love every Wilson that I've ever owned. I don't think that there's one that I haven't liked or loved. And again, keep in perspective, as I've matured, the things that I loved at the time, maybe I won't like as much today. So I have a pair of What Puppy 3.2s in my collection. One of these days I'll dust them off and listen to them and see if I still have the same kind of memories and love as I did back then for them. So anyway, the Alexia Vs, when they came out, I had the opportunity to hear a pair in our own listening room. It's finished in crimson red gloss, absolutely a gorgeous finish. I want to say I was a little bit unsure of what to expect, and I'm not sure why. I think maybe part of it is because we had been listening so much to the new Sonus Faber Amati G5s, which again, you can also see our reviews in the link below. I didn't know what to expect. I found that the new Sonus Faber G5s, the Amatis, were so good in so many ways. They retained the Sonus Faber's musicality, but improved in so many other ways. The bass was now incredible. The deep and mid bass was just, I've used the word concussive. It literally is that. The mid-range retains that richness and warmth, but even with more detail, with more speed, with more clarity, with more effortlessness. And then on top of that, the dynamic range, the contrast between soft and loud, and all of the ranges in between has improved very significantly. So I was so impressed with the Amati, I wasn't sure what I would expect out of the Alexia 5 or Alexia V. To compound that, we had to sell our Sasha DAWs because we were waiting too long to get a pair, and the client didn't want to wait, so we sold our demos, and I won't get a pair until May. So I don't like to rely on my oral memory. So to date, we haven't compared the Sasha DAWs to the Amatis for that reason. And when we do get the Sasha DAWs, we will probably do a comparison between the two, because price-wise, they are not that far from each other. Anyway, set up the Alexia Vs, and within seconds, without burn-in, it was like coming home. Any tentativeness that I had about being worried about the sound not being as good all disappeared. There is this lightness to the sound. It's airy, it's clear, it's transparent, it's open. It's as if a little sheen of gauze between you and the performance is taken away, and suddenly you see everything. Those of you who wear glasses or contacts will know what I'm talking about when I describe this. When you go in for your eye checkup and the optometrist puts the different lenses in front of you, as he continues, the picture gets sharper and clearer. And that's exactly what I heard with the Alexia Vs. Things became sharper, became clearer compared to the Amati G5s. Now, let's put it in perspective as well. The Amati G5 in the US sells for, I think, about 40,000 or thereabouts. I can't remember offhand. The Alexia Vs are 67.5 and 69.5 for the crimson red finish. So it's substantially more money. But it also highlights the two very different philosophies of the companies. Sonus Faber has always come from this belief that they want to use wood as enclosure because they feel that wood gives the most natural sound to instruments. Wilson has always come from the perspective that they don't want the speaker to be an instrument. They want the speaker to be neutral as possible, to allow for the performance and the sound to come through. And both have their own strengths and weaknesses for sure. What I can tell you is that the Alexia V allowed me to hear deeper as an audiophile and also experience as much as a music lover, which is sometimes very hard to do. There are systems and speakers on the market where you can hear incredible detail and at the same time not enjoy music. With the Alexia V, I didn't find that at all. And I think kudos to, in large part, the tweeter, the soft dome tweeter with the new 3D printed back cap, the crossover technology, the new clarity caps Wilson caps, capacitors that are in the crossover, all of the improvements that they've made to the Alexia 2s. The Vs just take it to another level again. Think of all the typical audiophile terms and descriptions that you want to use, and certainly the Alexias will do all that and more. The fascinating thing was that with the Amatis, I had this beautiful, warm, rich, inviting sound all the time. When I went to the Alexia V, I could instantly hear that a large part of the warmth was because of the electronics. I happened to be using the Macintosh at the time, and I realized right away that that warmth came from the Macintosh. And when I switched over to the D'Agostino's, a richness still existed, but a sense of cloudiness disappeared. The more transparent D'Agostino's were very evident. The increased dynamics and bass control in particular was very obvious with the D'Agostino, whereas with the Macintosh, you don't have quite the same kind of bass control. You don't have the same kind of power and clarity in the bass that the D'Agostino's have. And this was very instinctive. You knew right away that that was due to the Macintosh, and that if you wanted even better, switch to better electronics. With the Sonus Faber, it wasn't that instinctive. It wasn't that obvious. When you switch to electronics, yes, you hear the differences very clearly, but it didn't compel you to want to switch, and that may be a good thing. Just to point out. The other areas that I found to be wonderful about the Alexia V is that, again, the soundstage image height is more natural. When I listen to a singer, he or she is taller, more naturally at a natural height. With the Amatis, while I did get a height that was taller than the enclosure, it wasn't to the same level of naturalness and height. Image density was also better with the Alexia V. Soundstage depth was better layered. Now what's interesting and what's fascinating is that the mid and deep bass of the Amatis had the same kind of concussive power as the Alexia Vs, at least within the room constraints that we were playing at, which is something that the previous generation Amatis didn't quite have. And so kudos to the Amati for being able to achieve that. Um, but from the upper bass on up, the Alexia is superior. If there's one area that, at least in our room, I wish the Amati G5 had a little bit more as the upper bass. It just seems to have a little bit of a dip, not quite as powerful, not quite as evident as I would like it to be. And again, it certainly could be the room. We've set up the system in the different wall in the same room, and I'm not getting quite the same kind of output out of the upper bass as I did previously. And so we might try that and see, maybe switch over and see how that works. When we get the Sasha DAWs, it'll be interesting to compare the two siblings and see if the Alexia V is so much better than the Sasha DAWs. One thing I can tell you is that I don't say things that I am not sure about. It's one of my core tenets to be very honest and truthful about what I know, what I remember. Um, and the Alexia V right now is simply startling, absolutely startling. And the other thing that's interesting is that, at least with the Macintoshes, they'll drive them well, and that may be because of the output transformers that the Macintosh have, so that the minimum impedance of the Alexia V is not too tough a job for the Macintoshes. The one thing you want to be careful with electronics with the Alexia V is that to make sure that your amplifier will handle 2 ohms thereabouts and has a lot of current. And make sure that the electronics are of the kind of sound that you like. So if you like a warm, sweet sound, make sure that you choose electronics that give you that. If you like a transparent sound, then go with electronics that give you that. I mentioned earlier that the highs are very open and very airy, but it doesn't produce that with any kind of grating character. Um, there are speakers on the market where they give you this tremendous clarity, speed and detail, or apparent speed and detail, but within a short period of time, you may find yourself tiring of that. Not with the Alexia Vs at all. In fact, if anything, you could even say that the Alexia V is a bit lush and possibly a little bit too sweet. Um, but it's interesting that it's not missing anything. All the highs are there, at least for my ears. And I had an audiologist test me a few weeks ago. I'm still hearing pretty good up to 16 kilohertz, which is quite surprising. And then it starts dropping off fairly significantly. Um, I don't find it missing any kind of airiness and detail, but it's just not in technicolor exaggeration, maybe the best way to describe it. Whereas when I hear other very good speakers, or at least very highly regarded speakers, I find the highs after a while grating to me. I won't mention names, many of you already know what I'm talking about. And that may be, however, something that you like, and that's okay too. But one thing to also be aware of is that with Wilson, the drivers are all very integrated and very well balanced. They match as one voice. This is much more difficult to do than you may realize. So you will see speakers in the market where they will use a tweeter made of a certain material, let's say beryllium or unobtainium. But then the mid-range is a totally different material, and then the bass drivers are different materials again. Every material has a different resonant frequency and a different resonant characteristic. So take, for example, metal. When you drop a coin on the ground, it will ring. We know what it sounds like as far as metal is concerned. And then when you take another material and you tap on it, it will have a different kind of resonant characteristic. Try to blend those. It's very difficult. And while your ears may be drawn to a certain sound at a certain frequency that, let's say, the tweeter might be giving you, if you listen, if you are a seasoned or mature listener, you will pick up the discontinuity. I don't hear that discontinuity at all with any of the Wilsons. It just sounds like one voice. Um, I tried a whole bunch of different kinds of recordings, great recordings, average recordings, poor recordings. And with poor recordings, you will easily tell this is a poor recording, and you may not enjoy it as much as, let's say, with the Sonus Faber, which are more colored and more forgiving. But then from average recordings on up, no problems whatsoever. And when you played incredible recordings, you're completely lost. Again, I want to point out it's not just a recording. As long as the music is wonderful, it's inspired, and the performers are great, you'll be drawn in, at least for me. So I'm really very, very pleased with the Alexia Vs. And in fact, I'm looking forward to comparing them to my Alexes. I just bought a pair of Alex Vs for myself. I don't know why I keep doing this, but I have a pair of Alex Vs. I also own a pair of XVXs. And I'm going to listen to the Alex Vs and see if the Alex Vs, as the bigger brothers, do much more to justify the higher cost. Because the Alex V, I think off the top of my head, is about $145,000. It's a lot more money. Is it worth that kind of difference, assuming you can afford it? So stay tuned for that. Anyway, let me just wrap this up. Is this a speaker for everybody? No. Obviously, even assuming that you can afford it and it's in the budget, is it what you will like? As I always say, when people call us over the phone or send us an email and, well, what do you think of this or what do you think of that? The best I can tell you is what I think, not necessarily what you will like. It's like food. Certain kinds of food will appeal to you more than it might appeal to me. I can't tell you that. What I can tell you is that with the Alexia V, I am entirely, absolutely in love with them. They are absolutely remarkable, and they are not that big that you cannot comfortably fit it into a normal sized room. And at the same time, they do incredible justice to superb music as well as to average recordings. Bad recordings, there's not much you can do about that except to go with systems that are more forgiving. And if the music that you listen to as a majority tend towards poor recording quality, then take that into account. This may not be for you. Anyway, so let me wrap up. Bottom line is, I love these speakers. I think they're wonderful. Wilson, Daryl, and his team have hit it out of the park. That this is substantially better according to my oral memory, which is, again, not necessarily to be trusted, but compared to the Alexia 2s, yeah, these are substantially better in every way I can think of. The settling time is better, the quiet in between the notes better, darker background, sharper image. It has this sweetness that I don't recall the Alexia 2 having. And in every way I can think of, it's just a remarkable speaker. Anyway, Adrian from Audio Excellence. If you enjoy this, please subscribe and share the video with other people. And of course, if you've heard the speakers, I'd love to hear your comments, good or bad. It doesn't matter to me. I'm always pleased to learn from other people and their experiences. And we'll see you again next time. Take care. Bye-bye.